Hey everyone, happy Monday. Stephanie, I think you had a pretty eventful weekend, so you might be a little tired. I'm definitely exhausted because I spent my weekend at a senior camp, which I thought would be politics free and uneventful. But I think I may have mentioned before, one of the teachers there, actually, all of the teachers are liberal except for me. And they're all one's from Canada, one's from Australia, and then there's, from Europe. And I am the only one who doesn't hate Trump. And I try to avoid politics as much as possible when I'm with these teachers. And normally I do a very good job of re-steering the conversation in a different direction. But there is one particular teacher who I really like her, but she's I think in her early 70s, mid 70s, or late 60s, and a very outspoken liberal Canadian who's been living in the Czech Republic for like the last 5 years. And she always tries to engage with me about politics and specifically Trump. And I
Does
always,
she know that like your
yes.
stance?
Oh,
Oh,
yes,
okay.
absolutely.
So she's
Absolutely.
like trying to push your buttons then?
She wants to ask questions, but she doesn't really want my answers on anything. She just wants, when people have
Yeah.
like Trump derangement syndrome and they just want to share their opinion with you, but they
Right.
don't hear anything you have to say.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So normally I'm very good about it, but I had been drinking. I think I probably had a bottle of wine just on my own while we had this big dinner. And it was maybe 10:30 at night. I'm going off of no sleep because I was sharing a room with six teachers and getting up early and going to bed late. And this is the second day, and I am completely exhausted and drunk. So she brings up, I can't even remember whether it started with the protests in LA or the Trump Elon feud, because she brings up this picture. It was like a broken heart with Trump on one side and Elon on the other. And she asked me something about whether I miss being in law enforcement. And it somehow transitioned into this political conversation where there's four of us in the room. And she and I are talking, and I had no fucking filter because
You had a bottle of wine and you're tired.
I had a lot of wine, I was tired, and I had zero filter. And we were literally like fighting for an hour. And there were two other teachers sitting there, like shrinking into the corner. And there was nowhere to go because there's six of us in one room, and two of them were still out partying. But there's really nowhere to escape, and it's raining outside, so no one's going to go anywhere. And it just kept getting louder and louder and louder. And I'm like, fuck it. Like, I'm just going to unleash and I'm not going to back down and I'm going to say all my points. And it's once it got to the immigration issue, which again revolved around all the protests, it was this like almost escalating to like an unhinged, completely unhinged conversation on both of our parts because I, by this time, was so riled up. And I started screaming at her about, like, what about all the unaccompanied migrant children? What do you have to say about that? And because she was telling me, like, no, immigration wasn't because of Biden and it had been going on long before Biden.
And this
And
is
I,
someone who doesn't live in the United States, too.
correct,
Yeah.
correct.
Okay.
And yeah, I was like spouting off numbers and data.
Yeah.
And when I brought that up, there was like I didn't know if she just checked out mentally because for like 10 seconds she said absolutely nothing. Because no one can counter that. No
Right.
Democrat can
Yeah.
fucking counter what about the migrant children?
Hmm.
And, and then another teacher finally said, you know what? It's almost midnight. We should probably go to bed.
Sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, yeah. And then the next morning it was just very awkward. And again, I try to avoid politics with these things, but it could not be helped this time.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like sometimes you just can't avoid it. And that's what I've noticed with people with Trump derangement syndrome is like you can try everything to like steer the conversation away. And normal people would like pick up on the points and move on. But it's like they can't help themselves. They just have to go there. And then when you bring up the facts, that's when they either shut down or get completely like unhinged and emotional. But
Yeah. Yeah.
oh, that sounds terrible. So
Oh,
what is summer camp for seniors? Do you guys actually go camping?
we were not outside in the woods, although these seniors, they do go camping. But we were in like a cabin in the mountains, or they call it the Highlands. And it's a weekend where it's very intensive, actually. It's 3 days of English classes. So you're teaching like 4 to 5 classes a day in the mornings. And then in the evening, there's a big dinner and they bring like a potluck
Hmm.
and they were playing music. One guy was playing guitar and everyone was singing, hence everyone getting drunk.
Yeah.
And it's it's a lot of fun, but it's mentally exhausting because I have to prepare lessons for all the, so it's like
Hmm.
12 classes in 3 days
Jeez.
and it's very intensive, but also I love working with seniors, so it was really fun. And this happened like Saturday night. It was Friday through Saturday, and this happened Saturday night. So by Sunday morning, I was just like so over it at
At
that
least it
point.
happened the last night, so you
Yeah.
could come home the next day. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, today we're going to talk about this very public feud between Elon Musk and Trump. And like, man, did things escalate quickly? I got so many memes and I was going to send them to you, but I'm like, well, you're camping and like, I didn't even know if you had reception. So I'm like, whatever, we'll just talk about it today. But like, holy shit, it just shit hit the fan so
Mhm.
fast. And I know we talked before about Elon being outspoken about the big, beautiful bill and how it would increase spending and how he thought that that would undo, the Doge cuts, which I agree with. Um, but up until that point, like he was pretty careful about wording things. I think he even said that, like, I want to be careful how I word this. He didn't want to offend Trump. And then it was like all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he just goes nuclear. And he posts, quote, time to drop the really big bomb at, and then he tagged Trump. And he said, at real Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. That's the real reason they have not been made public. Have a nice day, DJT. And he ended up deleting the post later on, but I want to break this down because I'm pretty sure that was the line that was crossed where there's just no coming back from this. Like I don't think they'll be able to move on and still be friends. So first of all, with the Epstein files, we already know that Trump's name has come up. Like we've known about this for years. Epstein had been at Mar-a-Lago, including some social function, and we've all seen that it's like the same video they play all the time where Trump and Epstein are talking and laughing. And it was clearly like a big event with a lot of people around. So it didn't really seem shady to me. Like it's not like Trump was on the Lolita Express with an underage girl on his lap, like some of the other photos of elites that have popped up. But we also know later on, Epstein was banned from Mar-a-Lago for making unwanted sexual advances towards a girl that reportedly was an employee's daughter. And then you have Bradley Edwards, who was an attorney that represented a lot of the Epstein victims, and he confirmed in sworn statements and interviews that Trump took action after that incident. So he broke ties with Epstein long before Epstein was even convicted and anything came to the surface. And Trump was also the only one that volunteered to help law enforcement in the Epstein case. And Edwards had said Trump was, quote, the only person who picked up the phone and said, let's just talk. I'll tell you what I know. So I asked our GPT about the flight logs, and it said that despite all the rumors, Trump's name actually doesn't appear on any official flight logs for Epstein's infamous Lolita Express, but there were unconfirmed reports that Trump may have once hitched a ride on Epstein's jet from Florida to New York, likely in the late 90s. But it wasn't a Lolita Express island trip, and it appears to have been a one-time event. And like, there's no evidence anywhere that underage girls were involved or anything illegal occurred during the flight. And also, Trump didn't charter or routinely use Epstein's plane, which I actually thought he did, but GPT said there's no like confirmed flight logs of that either. So, anyhow, the bottom line is the Biden administration had access to the Epstein files for the past 4 years. Considering they tried everything to get Trump, literally everything, don't you think they would have outed him if there was any dirt on him and Epstein? Like, clearly, there's nothing there, or that would have come to light during the campaign. And what's funny is when Elon posted that post about Trump and the Epstein files, people were commenting with photos of Elon and Ghislaine Maxwell. So it's the whole like people living in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. And maybe that's why Elon ended up deleting the post because it was just a lot of backlash. So I don't know. I think that was like the straw that broke the camel's back. Like when he posted that, I'm just thinking, that's it. There's no way they're ever gonna just, move on from this in a positive way. But shockingly, I don't know what you think, Tara, but I thought Trump's posts in response were very tame for him. From what I saw, unless something else was deleted, he posted 3 posts on Truth Social. So the first one, he said, Elon was wearing thin. I asked him to leave. I took away his EV mandate that forced everyone to buy electric cars that nobody else wanted, that he knew for months I was going to do, and he just went crazy. And the next post said the easiest way to save money in our budget, billions and billions of dollars, is to terminate Elon's governmental subsidies and contracts. I was always surprised that Biden didn't do that. And then the last one I thought sounded actually positive and was likely damage control that maybe his team put together. But it said, I don't mind Elon turning against me, but he should have done so months ago. This is one of the greatest bills ever presented to Congress. It's a record cut in expenses, $1.6 trillion, and the biggest tax cut ever given. If this bill doesn't pass, there will be a 68% tax increase and things far worse than that. I didn't create this mess. I'm just here to fix it. This puts our country on a path of greatness. Make America great again. So I thought that sounded pretty positive, but in my opinion, I feel like Elon looked like the unhinged one and Trump handled it pretty well, but I don't know. What do you think?
I do think Trump has been slightly more reserved than we know he's capable of. But after these social media posts, he did go on mainstream media and make several comments. Like he told NBC News that Elon was disrespectful to the office of the president. He told ABC and CNN that Elon lost his mind and is unstable. And he also basically threatened that Elon will face very serious consequences if he starts funding Democrat candidates. So again, these were not Truth Social rants, these were on mainstream media. So that makes me wonder, is there some kind of strategy move, with doing
Yes.
this?
Well, yeah, because before you go on media, your whole team is like prepping you.
Mm.
And that's where I want to get into the conspiracy theory out there about this because there's a lot of theories going around. And I think the biggest one that I've been seeing is a lot of these people, a lot of conservatives thinking this whole feud was planned. And they're saying, how this is like 5D chess and how these guys are, geniuses and always 5 steps ahead of everybody else, which is true. Like I do think that. Um, but if you back up and you look at before all this happened, the left was attacking Elon Musk and Tesla. And they were also attacking the Doge spending cuts and, doing all those ridiculous things like trying to lock out Doge from getting in buildings and all, just all that nonsense. Now, since Elon's feuding with Trump, the left is all of a sudden supporting him again because they have Trump derangement syndrome. And, yeah, we have someone that's fighting against Trump. This is great. So now all of a sudden, like, they're taking his side. So, this conspiracy theory that's going around is that this is all staged to get the left to back the Doge spending cuts being codified into law because that's what they're trying to do right now. I personally think that's a little far-fetched. I mean, maybe, but I think what's more likely that happened was Elon got in there and just like Trump in his first term had good intentions, but then gets in there and realizes the government doesn't function efficiently like a business. It's a slow-moving dinosaur, and you can't just go in there and make a bunch of cuts and fire everyone. You have Congress that has to get involved. You have federal judges that are blocking you. You have people personally attacking you and your company. So it's like not only was he not able to cut out everything he wanted, but then his business, he's got his dealerships being firebombed and people just attacking Tesla left and right. And so, how do you get it all to stop? You publicly turn on Trump. And so, knowing all these Trump deranged lunatics who have been attacking him will then back off because now you have a common enemy and he can get back to life and running his businesses. Like that's kind of what I think his strategy was. Like I'm just going to publicly like have this feud and then people will leave me alone and go back to hating Trump. Um so there's that. But then there's also all the rumors that have been leaking about him not getting along with multiple people in the cabinet. He allegedly got into some type of an altercation in the hallway with Scott Bessent. And that was I think a couple weeks ago, but he was clearly upset about Trump bringing in Sam Altman for like the whole AI thing, not to mention all the other billionaires he's been bringing in. And I just don't think that Elon Musk is used to people telling him no or, letting him take the sidelines. Like he's used to being the one in charge and leading things, and he wasn't in this situation. And you and I have said from the very beginning we weren't sure if we could trust him. And I think we were right to question his loyalty. It's like here he had Trump's back for what, like a few months, and now he's already turning on him. And that's why I'm questioning all these other billionaires who are surrounding Trump all of a sudden. Oh, and on top of all the other things, Elon has a black eye. And everyone's like, where did that come from? He says it's from his son, who's like 3 years old. So the whole thing just seems suspicious, especially after he went on Joe Rogan and, said how he's afraid of being assassinated. So it makes me wonder, like, did someone get to him? Is someone, like, who knows what else is going on behind the scenes? And then on top of all of that, he's got all of his personal shit like a custody battle that he's now in with that conservative influencer who like went public saying she had Elon's baby and he wasn't returning her calls. And I guess they're in a court battle now. So it just sounds like things are really imploding in his life. Or again, like maybe this is just one big theater performance and we're all just being distracted right now. I don't know what to believe anymore.
While I was listening to you, I thought about something that we actually talked about last week, or maybe the week before. I don't remember anymore. We were talking about the big, beautiful bill and how we're spending all this money, right? And you just explained some of it in that comment from Trump. But you and I were also against this kind of spending. So
Mhm.
we spoke out about that on our podcast. We're not Elon Musk. So, we're not getting that kind of backlash or attention from it. But is it that he is not, no longer loyal to Trump or that he's calling out something that he sees as being wrong? Because, I mean, technically you and I called it out too. But
Yeah.
I honestly think this whole thing makes our country just look like a fucking joke on the world stage. Like, we've already lost credibility as a respected nation with Biden in office, asleep at the wheel for 4 years. And now we have two of the biggest egos in the world, right? The president of the United States and the richest man on earth having a cat fight and this ridiculous social media war. And it's a fucking reality show. And I think this just shows the world the total dysfunction and disharmony within the United States and our government specifically. And I find it frustrating because we were so excited about this whole unity party idea, right?
Yeah.
And Elon was a big part of that. And in less than 6 months of being in office, like the whole concept's falling apart. And that's like a red flag, right?
Hmm.
And then there's the other aspect of looking at this from the perspective of a national security threat. Because whether it was said in the heat of the moment or he really meant it, like things on both sides have been said very heated. And one of the things Trump did was threaten to pull contracts from SpaceX because they're the ones that are like the main launch provider for NASA. So that was like kind of concerning to me in context of looking at it from our Friday episode where we were talking about Peter Thiel and Palantir and, the power that the elites have
Hmm.
and all the money that they have. And so this childish feud between Trump and Elon, to me, it kind of highlights some very dangerous concerns about our national security and the impact that this kind of infighting that's going on between like the billionaires and politicians that are supposed to be in the same party. And then I looked at it like, oh my God, Elon has just spent the past 4 months having direct access to a shit ton of national security information and federal databases, like critical infrastructure, defense contracts, military communications, all the AI shit. And there's still Doge employees who worked under Elon who are currently working for the federal government. And, this is the conspiracy side of me speaking here. But there is a possibility that Elon could retaliate. He could leak sensitive information. He could even weaponize the companies that he controls. Like I mentioned SpaceX, and that's critical for NASA, but he also has Starlink, and that's the satellite internet that our military uses. And then he has X, which is one of the biggest social media platforms in the world. So he can use that to spin whatever narrative he wants. He can push anti-government sentiment or anti-Trump specific sentiment because he's the one in control of it. And like imagine if he decided he wanted to work with China or Russia or Iran. I'm not saying any of this is happening. I'm saying he has the power and the money. And I think that that's where it is such a dangerous issue when we give this amount of power to these private tech billionaires who then are tied in with government operations. And it's like the things we were speculating about with that Palantir conversation on Friday. We're watching how that could technically unfold in real time with this Musk Trump conflict.
Well, yeah, and they just handed the left and the mainstream media so much ammo because this is what they were crying about during the whole Doge thing. Like, oh, he has access to all this, sensitive information. And so, yeah, like when you have a big public feud like this, which was it's like watching Mean Girls. I mean, it's like
Yes.
high school drama. It's so ridiculous. But yeah, it does just give the left ammo. So it's like the big question is, did Elon really just like lose his mind? Which, isn't that crazy to think because the guy gets no sleep. I mean, he said he sleeps like 4 hours a night, if that. He's under all this stress. His companies are being attacked. He's personally being threatened. He's got this custody battle. Maybe he just like, went nuts because he's got all this shit going on.
I
Or
mean,
maybe they're
wait,
planning something.
well, look at what I just said at the beginning of this podcast. I had no sleep for like 2 days
Yeah.
and I kind of went on my own little unhinged rant with somebody. So look at,
Maybe he had a bottle of wine and, just texted something he shouldn't have texted. And I mean, clearly he realized it was probably not a good idea if he deleted the post. So it's just wild that like all of this happened in a couple of days.
Mhm.
But again, I feel like this is a warning for how many warnings does Trump freaking need? Be careful who you trust. There's,
Yeah.
the whole thing with the signal chat and now this, it's like trust these, don't trust these people. So now it makes me wonder, is Elon like just done with politics? Because that was what I was thinking. Like, okay, he's just going to be done. He's going to take a step back, go back to running his businesses. Well, apparently not, because he posted a poll on X asking if it was time to create a new political party in America that actually represents the 80% in the middle. And this was interesting because I looked at that post and I'm like, just at face value, I'd be like, hell yeah. I mean, we talk about this all the time. And over 5.5 million people voted, and 80% of them said yes. So we talk about this like uniparty that has both Democrats and Republicans in it that are not for the middle class whatsoever. We've seen that play out for years. But I feel like that's why Trump resonated with so many people. I feel like he did create a new party. It's just under the Republican banner, but it's not the same Republican Party that was here, in previous administrations. And I think it's very different from old school conservatives. So looking at that poll, I don't necessarily think it's that people aren't with Trump. I think it's people like us that are sick and tired of establishment politicians and realize we need to like start fresh with a new party. So I think, people are reading into this a little too much, but I'm wondering, is this a hint that Elon is going to try and form a third party and run in the next election? What do you think?
He did put a post on X and floated the name the American Party. And he said, quote, Trump has 3.5 years left as president, but I will be around for 40 plus years, end quote. So it sounds like possible presidential ambitions to me, or at least he's testing the waters with politics. And even if that's not the case, like he's indicating that he's in it for the long game, right? And on top of that, he has the money to back it up and influence elections because I do believe he was a very strong influence on people voting for Trump, and his money did a lot for Trump's campaign. So, on top of that, he has the social media influence capability. And it's totally possible that he could launch a new party and undermine both the Republican and the Democrat parties. But do I see that being viable? Not really, because of fucking Congress. Like, I could see that something years in the future, but certainly not anytime soon. But who knows? I haven't anticipated the shit that's happened the last 4 years, right?
Right.
But I don't know if you saw this. Do you know who Andrew Yang is?
The name sounds really familiar. I'd probably, maybe if I saw his face, I'd recognize him.
Well, I guess he's the founder of the Forward Party, and he's like a former CEO of a tech company. And he reached out to Elon and offered to collaborate with him. And so I looked into this, which took me down this whole other rabbit hole of like conspiracy, because here we have like another tech billionaire with government ambitions. And this guy Yang was a Democrat candidate for president in the 2020 elections. And Stephanie, one of the things he ran on was the concept of universal basic income and paying every American $1,000 a month with no strings attached, which to me is a total red flag, especially when I start thinking about AI and how it's going to take over jobs and how, universal basic income is the perfect way to control the population.
Well, yeah, and this was something that Elon Musk talked a lot about for years because he was saying AI is going to take everyone's jobs. We need to have a universal basic income. I wonder if this is the guy. There was some billionaire that was like self-funding like a test run of this. And I want to say it was in LA or somewhere in California where they were giving people $1,000. But like looking at this now, as a joke, like in 2020, $1,000, great. Now $1,000, like what is that going to do? Like maybe pay an electric bill? Like
It
it's
might it
not
might
gonna.
buy you, yeah, might buy you gas for a couple
Right.
weeks. So, yeah, but like again, now that's like a whole other rabbit hole we could go down.
Yeah.
But Yang dropped out of the Democrat Party in 2021 because he said it was too ideological and too disconnected from real people. So he founded the Forward Party in 21. And it's an independent party that honestly has some really good points that totally resonate with me and a lot of the things that we talk about on the podcast because this party supports like ranked choice voting so that elections actually reflect the will of the people. And it's not a situation where, you go to the polls and you vote for the lesser of two evils because you really don't like any candidate, but you have no choice. And it calls for open primaries, term limits for Congress, transparency with getting rid of career politicians, banning stock trading for Congress, transparency with federal spending, banning politicians lobbying after leaving office, like all the things that we're very supportive of. And I think we could do a whole episode about this. But I honestly think most Americans are sick of the two-party system. And if there was a good enough candidate backed by Elon's money, even if it's not Elon himself, backed by Elon's money, with this, the platform of social media that he has, I do think he could get a lot of Americans to vote for it.
I think so too, because think about all the Democrats that have left the party. I mean, you look at the ratings on CNN and MSNBC and just everything that's happened, like KJP, leaving the Democrat Party, like all these people that are leaving but won't go to the Republican Party because they have Trump derangement syndrome and they're left homeless. So that's like a huge portion of people from the left you can grab. And then people from the right, I think again, like they support Trump, but don't necessarily support the Republican Party
Mhm.
necessarily. So I think if there were a time for an independent party to actually rise up, it would be now. Um, and it's interesting because Trump had voted Democrat a lot throughout his life. Like he was
Right.
considered a Democrat at one point in time. And the reason he is now considered Republican is just because there wasn't really another option. So he just
Right.
fell under the Republican banner. But um, I could see it happening. I think the reason he didn't was because then you're not going to be in the debates. The mainstream media isn't going to give you any time, which we saw with RFK. But now we're seeing you don't really need that. The ratings on those things are like next to nothing. You could go on podcasts, you could go on social media. So it'll be interesting, especially with a guy like Elon. He'll get a lot of attention if he decides to either run or back this Andrew Yang or whoever steps into that spot. So,
But I
oh,
also think there's a possibility that they'll make up. I mean, look at Trump's history with
yeah.
even with your governor, right? With DeSantis and the feud that they had going on, right?
Even
And
with
that they're
JD
fine now.
Vance.
Yes,
JD
exactly.
Vance really shit talked Trump in the first term, and now
Right.
they're, best buddies.
Yeah, and I think Trump posted something, I think last night or Saturday night, about the riots that are going on in LA. And Elon reposted his Truth Social post and put like little American flags on it. So,
Okay,
maybe
so
that's the
he's
olive branch, you
yes,
know?
yes. It's so funny, all the different like AI videos that are out there. My husband sent me one and it showed like Elon going off to Mars and he's like all lonely and sad. And then Trump's like at the golf course and he's all lonely and sad. And then they like, come together at the end of life and Trump's like on his deathbed and he's like, I'm so sorry. And Elon's like, I regret everything I said to you. And it was just like hilarious to watch. But yeah, it's sad because you see these two incredibly smart, powerful people that came together and to watch it so publicly just explode like that is again, like you said, it just makes everyone look bad. It makes the country look bad and they need to get their shit together. So, okay, you mentioned the protests. The protests, like the war zone freaking erupting in Los Angeles. My God. I was watching videos this morning, and I mean, literally, it looks like a freaking war zone. I couldn't
Mhm.
believe it was LA, but this all broke out pretty much immediately after ICE conducted a raid, arresting 44 illegal migrants. So protesters started jamming highways, they were blocking federal buildings. And at the time that I looked this up, there were 118 people arrested. I would imagine the number is much higher at this point. So anyhow, Trump deployed 2,000 National Guard troops to LA, which was overriding objections from Governor Newsom and Mayor Bass. No surprise there. And Governor Newsom called the troop deployment, quote, a serious breach of state sovereignty and purposefully inflammatory. And he requested that the guard be withdrawn. So the DHS issued a statement labeling the protests as violent, claiming that rioters were assaulting ICE officers, slashing tires, damaging federal property. And of course, the ACLU has to chime in and threaten legal action, saying, of course, this is constitutional overreach. Even though you can just do a simple search and look it up, Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution grants Congress the power to establish a uniform rule of naturalization. And by extension, immigration enforcement, especially at the national level, is a federal responsibility. And then you have the Immigration and Nationality Act, where the president and DHS have broad powers to enforce immigration laws. They can conduct raids. They can even remove individuals that are unlawfully present. So it's just bullshit. It's like when you look at the facts, this is not a constitutional crisis. You also have the Insurrection Act that allows the president to deploy troops without a governor's request. in certain conditions, like insurrection, domestic violence, or when federal laws are being obstructed, which they are. So I'm just sick and tired of the left like throwing all this shit out and saying they're going to sue and legal action when there's no facts supporting that whatsoever. There are illegal migrants in this country and ICE is removing them. Nothing about that is a constitutional crisis. And not to mention, like, this is one of the top issues, either number one or number two, next to the economy that Americans voted on. But as usual, the left sides with criminals and illegal migrants over US citizens. And I'm freaking sick of it.
Yeah, I have a lot to say about this. And like,
Oh,
first
I'm
of all,
sure you do.
yes, they do. First, let's call it what it is, because this is not a fucking protest. These are riots that are going on with like thousands of unhinged people destroying the city, smashing windows, looting businesses, shutting down the freeways, throwing fireworks and concrete. They're setting these self-driving Waymo vehicles on fire, vandalizing shit, throwing Molotov cocktails at the police. And I'm sorry, but any media outlet that's referring to this as quote unquote protesting is full of shit. And I've talked to a couple of my former coworkers who have been working these quote unquote protests the past 3 days, and it is a fucking shit show. And I talked to one of them this morning briefly who was in the middle of it all, like they were standing down for 30 minutes for something. And this is from the mounted unit, which is the unit that deployed the horses. And this was like 6:30 a.m. my time, so like 10:30 p.m. in Los Angeles. And they were gearing up to go move another crowd. And he's telling me about how they were getting M80s and M100 fireworks thrown at the horses, at the cops. It's been total fucking chaos. Honestly, I was a little envious because like I'm not there. And this is honestly becoming one of the most epic riots in LA history. I'm surprised they even deployed units on horseback because normally with this type of thing, they deploy them in subs and on foot because of the way, people treat the horses, even though they are phenomenal for pushing crowds, but not when explosives are involved.
Those
Although,
poor horses.
yeah, but
That's
they've been kicking ass, which is really cool. I don't think anyone's been injured that I'm aware of. Um, but anyway, he was telling me this is the first time he's been a cop with LAPD for 27 years. He said this is the first time that the department has deployed tear gas to disperse crowds in his history with the department. And I'm pretty sure they used tear gas in the DNC protests in 2000. And even if that was the case, that was like 25 years ago. Even during the Rodney King riots in 92, it wasn't LAPD that deployed tear gas, it was the National Guard. So this is really historic with what's going on right now, especially in the context of the fact that LA is a sanctuary city, right? So you have all these riots about immigration in the sanctuary city where the police are usually told to stand down, which I had to do countless times in my career and not get in the action, which is another reason why I'm so envious right now. But anyway, so we have, first of all, the number you mentioned, like 120 something. That's there's two protests or two riots. I'm not even going to use the word protest. Maybe the one in San Francisco is more of a protest because there are also arrests being made in San Francisco and they're not making the headlines that Los Angeles is making. But from what I understand, like there was 121 people, like total, or 120 people if you count all the cities in California that are dealing with this right now. And I think in Los Angeles, it's like 60 people or something. But we have, Mayor Bass and city officials that are blaming ICE and doubling down on the sanctuary city status and encouraging people to support community organizing. Because I guess that's the new word for rioting in Los Angeles, community organizing. So, of course, the media and the liberal left and Congress are calling this insanity because that's what it is. They're calling it peaceful protests, which I don't understand how anyone could be watching TV with the reporter standing there with a vision of a burning city behind them saying, "Oh, there are protests going on in Los Angeles." And it's like, but at the same time, we already know the left's definition of a peaceful protest from watching cities burn for weeks during George Floyd and the Summer of Love. And it's just, how do they say this with a straight face? I don't know. It's completely ludicrous to me. And Then we have theatrics from Governor Newsom, who, of course, is blaming the chaos and the rioting on the Trump administration. And he basically said that California didn't have a problem until Trump got involved. And he said that border czar Tom Homan has threatened to have, well, I guess he has actually threatened to have both Newsom and Bass arrested. So Newsom went on MSNBC. And I want to say a couple quotes he said because he said, "Come and arrest me. Let's get it over with, tough guy. I don't give a damn. Why doesn't he do that? He knows where to find me." And then he's talking about how Homan's arresting children. And he says, quote, "Lay your hands off 4-year-old girls that are just trying to get educated. Lay off people who are just trying to live their lives, pay their taxes, have been here for 10 years. The fear, the horror. What the hell is this guy? Come after me, arrest me. Let's just get it over with." I don't know about you, Stephanie, but I think that's like an open invitation. And somebody please go arrest Gavin Newsom.
Seriously, though, I don't understand why they don't. Like, I've never understood that with sanctuary cities. You are breaking federal law. You're housing illegal migrants. How is that not aiding and abetting a crime? I don't understand why they don't. And I think they should. Maybe they should set an example there. And it's really hard watching these protests now knowing they're paid. A lot of these people that showed up were paid to rile things up and get everyone all, you know, riled up. And it's all just bullshit. It's all just staged. So it's like, how do you take any of this shit seriously at this point?
Yeah, but the one thing that I am looking at seriously is Newsom just announced a lawsuit, I think yesterday, against the Trump administration, saying that our government is unlawfully deploying the National Guard. And you were talking a little bit about the Insurrection Act earlier, but Newsom is saying this is a violation of the Posse Comitatus Act and Federal 10 of the U.S. Code. And I think this is a very interesting argument, and I'm curious to see how it plays out in the courts because I think we're going to find that out in the next few days because the way that guard units work depends on whether they're under state or federal control. And I want to get into this a little bit because I think it's important to understand the difference in the context of this particular lawsuit. Because when guard units are under state control, they fall under Title 32 of the US Code. So that means the governor is in command, not the federal government. So when guard units are under state command, they can do law enforcement functions. Like they work with local police departments, they can make arrests, and they can take care of business with these protests. But this kind of thing is usually only used for natural disasters like hurricanes and floods and fires when the governor calls in the National Guard to help law enforcement. But when the National Guard is federalized, they fall under Title 10. So instead of the governor being in control, the president's in control, and this is when posse comitatus applies. But that means that guard units under posse comitatus cannot make arrests and they cannot enforce laws unless the president invokes the Insurrection Act, which Trump did, or Congress passes a specific law to enforce it. And even if the governor consents, posse comitatus can't be overridden when Title 10 is in effect. So when Trump federalized the National Guard on Saturday, deploying these 2,000 troops, Newsom saying this is a breach of state sovereignty because Trump didn't coordinate the move with him. So if the court rules in Newsom's favor, this could actually block guard units from operating anywhere in California except federal property. And we've looked at how the courts have responded to every time Trump makes an executive action or tries to use a law like this to, help his agenda get accomplished that the American people voted for. So I don't have a lot of faith that they're going to the courts are going to uphold this. And this is actually another very historic thing that's going on right now because this is the first time that a president has nationalized a state guard unit without the governor's consent since 1965. And this is very different because when that happened, it was President Lyndon B. Johnson who federalized the Alabama National Guard under Title 10 without consent of the governor because it was the police officers, like the state and local police officers, who were like attacking and beating actual legitimate peaceful protesters who were marching in that Selma to Montgomery march for civil rights for Black Americans in Alabama. And to me, that's like the that was the actual definition of protest, where you had nonviolent, unarmed people engaging in their lawful First Amendment rights, not the animals that are running through the streets in Los Angeles throwing explosives and lighting shit on fire. It's like the opposite, right? So now it's the protesters, aka the rioters, who are committing these acts of violence. And even the LAPD is calling this a riot, which they normally don't even do. So, as usual, you have the MSM and the left gaslighting the public, spinning the narrative by saying, these are peaceful protests. But what is it really? This is all fucking political theater being used as a catalyst for encouraging violence under the guise of immigration oppression and human rights. And I think this whole idea of military intervention into state jurisdiction has the possibility of escalating into something much bigger than we even saw with the George Floyd riots, because that was about law enforcement. That wasn't even about our entire federal government. And this is unprecedented what we are seeing right now.
Well, it's interesting that you explain how the National Guard works, like in coordination or without coordination from the state, because now I understand 2020 a hell of a lot more. Because during 2020, I was like, what the hell? Why are they not bringing in the National Guard? And like Trump kept saying, like, I want to, this is available for them. And, I thought, well, maybe he's just letting these cities burn themselves down, but maybe this is why. Like he knew there was going to be this issue. And you're right. Like if it goes through the courts, we've seen they are going to vote against Trump. They do it
Mhm.
every time. Could this even escalate to the Supreme Court? I don't know, but it's absolutely insane. And you're right. Like it is the guise of like, oh, human rights, when we've all seen open borders and letting all these people in, that has nothing to do with human rights. That goes against human rights. How many women have been raped? How many people have been killed coming in here? And again, like you said at the beginning, the hundreds of thousands of migrant children that we still don't know where they are.
Mhm.
So the, it's just bullshit. That's what they're fighting for. That's what the left stands for. And again, the majority of Americans do not agree with
Right.
letting illegal migrants stay here, especially the criminals, which are the ones that ICE is going after. So it's like, let them keep running with this topic and they're going to keep losing people. And then maybe this third party that Elon's trying to start is going to gain more traction. I don't know. But again, it's just like, all of this shit makes me wonder, are these all distractions? I mean,
Mhm.
clearly they're distractions. It's all anyone's talking about, but like what else is going on? And there are other things going on. There's actually something that I'm very concerned about, but I don't really hear many people talking about that's happening while all this other shit's going on. So you have Zhenyang Liu, who's a Chinese researcher that was caught at the Detroit Metropolitan Airport attempting to bring pathogens into the United States. And one of the pathogens was a fungus that's known for causing severe crop damage. And he allegedly like intended to conduct experiments with this fungus at the University of Michigan, where his girlfriend, Young Quinn Jian, also a researcher, worked. And the university did not have the proper federal permits to handle a high risk pathogen like this. And I guess this fungus causes head blight in wheat and barley, which can destroy entire harvests and produce toxins that are harmful to humans and livestock. So, yeah, that's great. So it's classified in scientific circles as a potential agroterrorism agent, which I'm like, oh my God, we're living in a world now where we have to worry about agroterrorism agents, because it can completely devastate like entire food supply chains. So Jian, I don't know if I'm saying her name right, but the female researcher apparently has ties to the Chinese Communist Party programs and has received funding for research specifically related to this fungus. So the two are now facing charges, including conspiracy and smuggling biological materials, making false statements, as well as visa fraud. So Liu was deported to China while Jian is in custody awaiting trial in the US. And what crossed my mind was how many times has this happened where they didn't get caught? And they were, they just went on in with the pathogens, especially during the Biden administration. And apparently, this threat's been going on for a while because back in 2020, people across all 50 states began receiving unmarked or poorly labeled seed packets, often with Chinese writing that were falsely labeled as like jewelry or toys. And the seeds came in like various forms. There were vegetables, herbs, flowers. And the thing is, the people didn't order them. So they get a package delivered to their door. They never ordered from China and it has seeds in it. And so the USDA and state agriculture departments issued warnings saying don't plant them because they thought they could be an invasive species and carrying diseases. And the Chinese government officially denied it, of course. But it's like, why would they have sent those in 2020 when we were going through a pandemic with all these supply chain issues? Were they trying to test biosecurity vulnerabilities in US agriculture? Was it because the relations were so tense with the US due to COVID at the time? Kind of like how tensions are tight right now with the tariffs. And it just makes you wonder, like, what other types of pathogens are easily being sent over inside of imports that aren't getting stopped and are in our country right now. And it's just another reason why we need to quit relying on China for everything and stop importing literally everything from China, including our prescriptions.
Yeah. Now, it's like while you're talking, I was thinking, I really wanted to bring some seeds back that I want to plant some
Yeah,
like
now's
flowers
not a
and
good
stuff
time,
that I've
Tara.
grown here. And I'm like, well, I definitely shouldn't be trying to do that because I know it's illegal anyway, but now I'm sure the restrictions will be even tighter. But it's like it's crazy because this is not like an isolated thing, right? You talked about the thing with people receiving the seeds in the mail, like that's insane. And like, I don't think anyone thought much about any of this until COVID, right?
Yeah.
And the Wuhan lab thing. But there have been things going on both before and after COVID with universities in the United States and Chinese researchers doing all this shady shit. And I was reading there was a guy even back in 2020 who had ties to, China. He was being paid like hundreds of thousands of dollars by the Wuhan University and then getting millions from the NIH and the DoD and all this crazy stuff. And there was like another in 2021, there was a Chinese national that was arrested for smuggling vials of biological materials in his socks into the US. And it's like, this is scary shit.
Yeah, it's very scary. And it's like, you think about a fungus for crops and it's like, oh, well, who cares? Well, if it can destroy like all of our farms, that's a big deal. And
A little bit.
again, like this is just one thing that was caught. Like, how many times has this happened where it wasn't detected? And, like what other biological weapons have they smuggled in? And
Yeah.
so it's just crazy because while Elon and Trump are fighting with each other, and while our own, US citizens are fighting the government to help illegal migrants, we have a real threat that's like
Mhm.
quietly taking place that nobody wants to pay attention to. And it's like maybe if we stop with all the fucking theater performances and focus on what's really going on, we can make some headway here.
Yeah.
Um, but I just feel like that unlocked a whole new fear now in me.
Yep. One of
So
many.
yeah, yeah,
Wait till they combine it with AI.
right? God. Yeah, it's getting wild, but that's a whole new fear to start out the week with. So yeah, sorry guys. I'll leave you with that. But we'll leave it there for now. So thanks for tuning in. We'll be back here on Wednesday with all the latest updates.